Hello, this is Jared Polak, founder of Entre Results, author of Entre Balance, author of Entre Business, founder of Entre Results Academy. Back and ready to rock and roll another really amazing podcast. Listen, this question, do I have enough money to hire my next employee? Or do I have enough money to hire my first employee? This is a power-filled question, a question that really is answered with coaching because it can't just answered with a podcast or a blog because your business is so unique and so dynamic. And that's why coaching and having one-on-one individual relationships or having masterminds to discuss this with the group is so important. So if you're not plugged into a mastermind or a coaching relationship, please do so. Obviously, we'd be honored to serve you in that capacity. But I'm going to give my best shot to give you some guidelines, some things to think about in regards to having enough money to hire your next employee. Now, we want to start off with three questions. Three questions before we even get into some possible solutions. So question number one, before you look to hire your next employee, are you at maximum efficiency with your current team? Do you have a productive labor force, essentially? Oftentimes, people look to hire more people, but really the problem is that they need to do more with the people they currently have. There's time gaps wasted. There's lack of labor efficiency. So before you hire someone new, make sure the current people you have are getting it done. And so that's number one, question number one. Question number two is, before you hire an employee, would it be better to purchase a system or a technology that would make it so you wouldn't need to hire that next employee? I remember when I started coaching around 2008 during the kind of recession time frame, a lot of organizations were looking to add more people, but they still were looking to invest in technology so they could become more efficient and they wouldn't have to replace people and actually cost less and lasted longer. And so those are questions to ask yourself. Do you actually need a person, or is there another tool, technology, resource that you could bring on board as opposed to hiring that person? And question number three, and this kind of overlaps all of them because I think we're really talking about hiring a full-time person, but really the question number three is, could you hire someone part-time? Or could you outsource it where you wouldn't have to have someone full-time or work fully for you, maybe another vendor that could do it for you? So what kind of individual could fulfill that need or service you're looking for? That's question number three. Could you outsource or could you do it part-time? Now, again, these are some guidelines, but let me give it a shot. Say you decide, hey, after all those questions, yes, I need an employee. Yes, I need someone either full-time or part-time or whatever. Here's some things to think about as you go in to make that decision. Number one, do you have 3 to 6 months saved up in your growth fund? Now, we talk about this in other podcasts and other blogs about having a growth fund, an account where it's just a place where you put money so you can grow. Maybe you invest it in a vehicle, or maybe you invest it in a person. But do you have 3 to 6 months set aside where if you hired someone, you would be able to pay their salary for 3 to 6 months before you'd actually even start getting a return on your investment if needed? Now, when I use the 3 to 6 months, that there's just sort of a gauge there. That's not a magic number, but do you have some money set aside that would allow you to do that? So number two, and this goes back to, again, knowing your numbers really well and going back into reading some other podcasts or blogs that talk about profit percentage. But if your goal is to be operating at 20% profit margin or net profit percentage, so we're not talking about margin, we're talking about bottom line net profit percentage is what we're talking about here. So after all expenses, paying all your people, paying yourself, at the very bottom, are you making 20% profit percentage? Now, if you are making 20% or 15% and you bring on a new employee and it drops it down to 10%, that's usually okay. Again, these are guidelines. You know, you might want to talk to your accountant and CPA and get different views on this, but usually it's okay if you drop down to 10% net profit for a little bit of time before the business grows to go back to 15 or 20%. However, if you're already at like 10% net profit percentage and you bring someone on and it drops it down to 5% or less, that's a very dangerous situation to be in. So knowing your numbers is really crucial in terms of when and how to hire. I know that's a higher level concept that we go over with a lot of people. So you might be like, what in the world is he talking about? Well, again, I'm doing the best I can for this podcast, but that's why coaching and longer relationships are more important than simply a quick podcast or blog. Number three, now this is where we start looking at commission-based positions. A lot of people are like, oh, yes, I can bring someone on. It's a sales position. It's 100% commission-based. So there's no risk at all. Not necessarily true at all, because the time it takes to train someone, the time it takes for you or someone else to invest in that person, that there's a time value to that. It's expensive to do that. And so do you have the ability as a company, the capacity to pay someone to train this commission-based salesperson? Or do you have yourself the time to do that? So again, thinking through the time value of training someone before you bring on the next person, even if it is commission-based. The fourth thing is, wow, this is a tough one. Actually, fourth one's not too tough. If it is revenue generating, do you expect to get results quickly? That's the other thing to know is you have to make sure you identify if you bring on a revenue generating person, hey, listen, we should be able to get results within a month. We should be able to jump up sales within a month because of bringing on this revenue generating person. Well, that obviously reduces your risk of bringing someone on and makes it more likely to probably be able to bring on someone sooner than say, hey, it's going to take 18 months before this position pays off in a revenue generating situation. So know if you are bringing on a revenue generating position, how long should it take to do that? All right, another question to ask, number 5, in regards to do I have enough money to hire an employee? It's if you're really looking to scale up, I mean, do you feel comfortable with acquiring debt, like bank debt, or do you feel comfortable with using investors in order to, like, if you really want to like add a huge repertoire of your team, like, do you have the cash to do that? And what's your comfort level with debt, and what's your comfort level with investors, right? So, really, angel investors is usually what I'm talking about here. We don't really work with tons of VC capital. That's a different level of business, and there's a whole different ball game. But we're talking about angel investors or debt. What's your comfortability? Are you willing to take that on? Are you willing to give up some of your company to grow that way, or are you willing to take on that extra debt in order to grow that way? And then the final, number 6 question, and this is what I ask everyone, and this is honestly one of the biggest problems that small business owners have, because they care so much, and they should care so much. But if you hire someone that's a revenue generating person or a new employee, and you have a clear job scorecard, which we help you put together, and you have a clear onboarding, and you have a clear training, and you do everything you can to give them the tools necessary, and you know that this person needs to be successful and should be successful within 2 months or 4 months or 1 month or whatever you predetermine, you know they should be, you do everything you can and they're still not successful within that amount of time, are you willing to let that person go quickly, knowing that it's not the right person early on? Because one of the biggest risks people have is they know right away that it's not the right person, and they keep them on way too long, and it ends up just destroying their business because of that. So that's the other thing to think about. And I guess here's one more thing I guess we can add too. Maybe number 7, for example, would be if you bring an employee on, could it put yourself in a financial bankruptcy type risk? Like if you brought someone on, would it put you in a position where you could lose your company because you make that hire? Never do anything crazy where you're putting yourself in a crazy risk. Like for example, maybe you're a small company and you really want to bring on like a $150,000 a year employee, and you just can't handle it, but you're feeling optimistic, because a lot of times entrepreneurs and business owners are optimistic that things will work out. Listen, don't put yourself in a position where it could totally just crush you. Okay? All right. So those are things to think about. Again, those are principles or guidelines. I know these are really fun topics we talk about with a lot of people, and it makes a huge difference for your business. So go out, take massive action, have a better than amazing day.